All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is RickCast. Last story of the night. Let's get to it. So, for the fifth year in a row, Kathleen Kennedy is planning to leave or exit Lucasfilm. Now, there's been rumors for the past 3 or 4 years that she's leaving this year. But it seems like this time she's actually got one foot out the door. So, from Variety, Star Wars boss Kathleen Kennedy planning to exit Lucasfilm at the end of 2025 after running. It's funny, we talked about Marvel. Did we talk about Marvel yesterday? Or 2 days ago, how Star Wars was the most recognizable intellectual property out there, and Kathleen Kennedy has done her best to not only drive it into the ground, she's driven it so far into the ground that it's going to turn into oil in about 4 years. Kathleen Kennedy, the longtime president of Lucasfilm, is expected to step down at the end of 2025. She intends to retire after her current contract ends, according to a source with knowledge of her plans. Once again, Kathleen Kennedy has not made this statement. It is just another, she's leaving. I'm telling you, end of 2025, she's leaving. What's the end of 2025? October, November, December? When? Details, people. A separate source close to Kennedy, however, dismissed the initial report by Puck as pure speculation. Kennedy joined Lucasfilm in 2020 as she co-chaired alongside Star Wars creator George Lucas. Shortly after, Lucas exited when they gave him $4 billion, which, by the way, I would jump ship as well. Kathleen Kennedy, she is a producer. That's a great question. She's been around forever. She was a longtime associate and a producer who worked with Steven Spielberg. She is a producer on the Indiana Jones movies, and she's worked with Spielberg for a long, long time. Now, she didn't have a lot of creative control or a lot of creative input into Indiana Jones and all these other properties that she's going to be given credit for in this article. And when she was given the full reins at Lucasfilm, she went 100% all DEI all the time. The future is female, the force is female, all these other kinds of things. That is, yeah. Well, actually, she killed 3 Bellator. Remember, they redid the Willow. They did a Willow series on Disney Plus, and that was such garbage that they actually took the Willow series off of Disney Plus. That's how bad it was. And Willow is an underrated movie. Just telling you. So she joined it, and blah, blah, blah. After he left, she is credited Variety, because Variety, Deadline, they're all just mouthpieces for the studios. So she's going to, they're going to soft land this as much as possible. She's credited with reviving the property by launching a sequel trilogy, which, if you actually run the numbers on them, they paid, $4 billion for Star Wars? They actually have not made their money back on it. They haven't made their money back on the Star Wars films because of the amount of money they've lost. They created this thing called Galaxy's Edge at one of the parks where they spent billions. They're taking this hotel in one of the Disney parks. It's called Star Wars Galaxy's Edge or Star Wars, whatever it is. They're turning it into office buildings. That's how badly it's done. In contrast to Marvel, they paid, I think, $4 billion for that, and that's made $21 billion. So they actually made their money on Marvel, where Star Wars, a much more well-known property, has actually been run so far into the ground, they don't know where to go with it. So The Force Awakens was okay. And then the critically acclaimed spinoff Rogue One, which everybody says is the quote-unquote best of the Disney Star Wars movies. That's like being the tallest midget in basketball. Kennedy also chartered a future of the franchise on streaming with a television series, The Mandalorian and Andor. Know what they're missing there is the much reviled Acolyte series, which was one of the most ridiculous. Disney paid $60 billion for Fox, but they paid $4 billion for Lucasfilm and $4 billion for Marvel back in like 2012. They didn't mention the Acolyte. They didn't mention the Book of Boba Fett. They haven't mentioned all of the other just absolute disasters that the Disney Plus streaming shows that were Star Wars have been. The Obi-Wan series, which they took arguably the most popular character from the prequel trilogy under Lucas, Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they turned him into a guy who's like, I'm just so sad, and I don't like anything about my life, and I hate everything, and I'm just such a bad male. However, the future of the company behind Star Wars has been a source of speculation over the years. The Force Awakens remains the highest grossing film in domestic box office history with 936 million and 2 billion globally. But the triad of Skywalker-centric blockbusters, they're not Skywalker-centric, they're Daisy Ridley-centric. They're trying to claim that, but it's not. Capped off the trilogy in 2019 with a still impressive 1 billion, about half as much as The Force Awakens. The rise of Skywalker. But the fact is, what they're doing is, we talked about this with Captain America, Brave New World. When you make a movie, whatever your budget is, and we're going to use basic numbers here, you spend $50 million for a movie. Then the formula is a little weird. It's either you take the budget and you double it for advertising, or you use a quarter of it for advertising. So let's just say they used a quarter of it. You've made a movie for $50 million, then you spent $25 million or $20 million to market it, right? So you're $75 million in on a film. You're going to have to make twice as much as that. You're going to have to make $200 million to make a profit. And people say, well, you spent $75 million on it, Rick. Don't you have to make $76 million in order for it to be profitable? Yes. But the problem is, like we talked about with Brave New World, the films, when they come out, you have to give money to the distributors. Then you have to give money to the distribution companies. Then you have to give the money to the actors, to the producers, and whatever, back end deals they make. Like Tom Cruise is famous for getting percentage points on every movie he makes, meaning he gets a cut of whatever the final box office is. No matter if it's a loss or not, they still have to pay him contractually. And producers, if they put so much money in, they're like, hey, you got to give me percentage points on the back end. So I got to get paid before you call it a profit. So it's not just a one-to-one thing. It's not like if you build, one of these stupid fidget toys and you make it for like $5 and you got to sell it for $10 to make a profit. No, there's a lot more complicated things. And then don't even talk about China and China's distribution, because once a film goes to China, unless it makes $200 million in the Chinese box office, you're not getting any of that money back, because China, I believe, takes 90%. It takes the majority of whatever's made in that territory and it keeps it, and then it sprinkles it back. And China and then the US are your two biggest box office territories. And then you have Europe, and then you have South America and all these other little places. They don't make as much money because their populations aren't that big. So that's why when you're like, well, this movie made 932 million. Well, if it cost 200 million to make, and then you had to make all that back, they didn't make as much as the final box office would show to you. And that's the dirty little secret behind films. They'll say, well, this film was made for... Great example. We've been talking a lot about It Ends With Us with Blake Lively. That movie was made for 25 million. Let's say they spent 25 million in advertising. You're in for 50 million. The movie made 325 million. So that movie made a huge profit. And the problem is, when you make these billion-dollar films, is you got to have a lot of money put in order to make whatever. You got to make billion-dollar films, right? You got to spend 200, 250 million until you actually get it. So that there is a lot of stuff. That's a great question, Steph. When I'm done with this topic, I'll end the show with that. But let me get through this. So they're saying, well, it made 932 million. Well, if it costs 250 to make and another 150 to produce, what are you in? You're in for almost $500 million. And then you take the percentage points. Disney probably made 200 million off of a $930 million, almost $1 billion film. So it's kind of crazy in that regard. Let's see. Earned a few years earlier, but they not be a big deal. But it came after the financial failure in 2018. Solo's A Star Wars Story, which became the first Star Wars movie to ever lose money in its theatrical run. At Lucas, Kennedy also oversaw the disastrous 2023 Indiana Jones and the Retirement Home of Destiny, the fifth and final film in the Harrison Ford-led series, which is so sad. I mean, my favorite Indiana Jones movie is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I love that film. That film is fantastic. For me, it's Last Crusade, Temple of Doom, not Temple of Doom, the first one. Temple of Doom is the second one. Is it? What's the first one? Is it Temple of Doom? and then Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's Last Crusade, Raiders of the Lost Ark, then Temple of Doom. All very good films, but that's my order. Let me know what you think your order is in this comment section down below. Thank you, Bellator. But then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, terrible. I mean, it's not a very good film. It was kind of just slapped together as a money grab. And then Dial of Destiny it did the classic thing for this 5 to 6 year run where they revitalized properties in order to humiliate the main character of them. They did it, and whatever you think of Mark Hamill, they absolutely decimated the character of Luke Skywalker in the last 3 in the Disney Star Wars. They decimated him, they made him look like a loser and all these other kinds of things, which people are going, it's Star Wars, man. You can't make Luke Skywalker a wuss. Now, of course, Mark Hamill is, so I mean, life imitates art in that regard. Anyway, Dial of Destiny generated $383 million against a $290 million budget. Now you can see the way that the financials work here. They made the movie supposedly. Now this is what they released. There were some people that said it cost $400 million, not $383. They try to hide those financials with tax credits, why they make them in places like England or Canada, because you get tax breaks and then they don't count that against the film. So they say it was officially 383 against a $290 million budget, and they lost $140 million. Those are all the official numbers. Star Wars has struggled to return to the big screen since Rise of Skywalker, though not for lack of trying. Over the years, Lucasfilm has they announced so many projects that I think Ryan Johnson, little Ryan Johnson, Squarehead Ryan Johnson, Rian Johnson, whoever, the guy who made the Return, the Sith one. The Last Jedi. He supposedly has a trilogy that's supposed to be made. Other people are supposed to have ones, but James Mangold, Taika Waititi, Donald Glover, all these people are supposed to. So Lucasfilm has plans to, quote unquote, eventually reintroduce itself to movie theaters. There's a movie called The Mandalorian and Grogu, or whatever the Baby Yoda is, continuation of that, and so forth. And so she will be studied. In business classes that are not partisan on how to destroy one of the most profitable franchises in history. In history, she has destroyed it to such a point that they can't even release something because the feeling around it is so negative. There's such a bad taste in the mouths of fans that they don't want anything to do with this project or this franchise or this intellectual property or whatever you called it.